The humans were more powerful than he'd been willing to give them credit for. They shot him, burned him, electrocuted him, and finally threw him in a box. If humans could handle fighting each other, they could certainly handle fighting him. They solved world hunger, brought about world peace, cured every disease, filled every need, and they grew bored with their crystalline cities they'd built for themselves. The end of all things crept quietly along after them, unnoticed. When they stopped fighting, mankind faded away. He still hated them, of course, but the ease at which they went almost astonished him. Suddenly, no one cared enough. Suddenly, almost no children were born. A few metal tubes threw themselves violently off the planet, and then, quite suddenly, humanity died altogether. He escaped his box not long after. After the end, though, the damage they'd done to the world crashed into reality, and the world died too. Plants withered away, then anything that ate plants, and then everything else. In a few thousand years, the carrion eaters died off. He was truly alone. At first, it was a welcome change. Then he learned the hard way that eternity was only really worth it when things changed. Without any other life around, nothing really changed on a day-to-day scale. He'd wake up, look out over the dead earth, oceans, or a nearly unchanging sky, then go back to sleep. For endless eons, he waited. He charted the stars by drawing in the dead earth and felt a pang of joy every time one of them died. They were always being replaced. Over and over, he'd see one die, another be born. Then again, humans had done the same thing for a long time. The sun had gotten larger and larger in the sky over time. It ballooned to fill the entire daytime sky. The oceans turned to deserts, and the deserts turned to molten glass. The whole surface of the earth glowed a deep orange. He suffered through the worst of it for a few million years, perched on one of the few rocks sturdy enough to stand up to the heat. He screamed when he could, but no one was around to hear him. Then the sun shrank into a tiny white point in the sky, larger than the brightest stars, but only just. The dead earth slowly cooled, though there was no more atmosphere left to breathe. He was alone with his thoughts, and again, he began to chart the stars. At first, it continued on as before. The charts began to cover more and more of the earth. With nothing but time, he drew his constellations and calculations. Once, the stars were replaced as quickly as they died. Now maybe two died before another was born. Later still, three. Then four. The number kept climbing until there was only a few dozen stars left in the sky. The only record that the sky had once been filled with light was etched on continent-spanning star charts across the surface of the dead earth. He realized, of course, his fate was inevitable. Even after all the stars had gone, he would still be here. He would be the only thing left in an infinite darkness that would continue for eternity. He rested his head on the rock and gazed at a star, wondering for how much longer it would burn before fizzling out. Then one day, a trillion years after the last star had blinked out, SCP-682 squinted at the night sky. A new star had formed. This one was brighter than anything he had ever seen before. It moved strangely and quickly. Eventually, it darkened and disappeared. A few years on, another shooting star joined it and darkened again. Then another. For millennia, a colony grew above him, larger and larger still, until it hung over him like a tantalizing treat. just out of reach. Then they began to land on his world. He felt the rage return. His world, his home. But they deliberately avoided his drawings, chose a few blank spaces between the constellations and calculations to dig out the earth. Then they placed boxes gingerly into the ground, covered them, and drew new markings. In a few months, they returned, this time with another box. He approached their landing party this time, staying as hidden as he could. He looked. They were humans. He listened to the ground for the vibrations of their speech, but the language was nothing he'd ever heard before. Over and over, year after year, they came, and year after year, he would go and listen. Eventually, he understood their language. Today, he'd woken up to another shooting star, again coming to his home. He made his way to the landing site and waited. The men and women followed the same pattern as always. He suspected they knew that he was there, but they'd made no moves against him. Maybe one day he'd kill them, destroy their ship, or take it to the stars and end them once and for all. But for all his petty fantasy, he knew that he would be alone soon enough. Time would destroy whatever he didn't, and in the end, he'd just be bored sooner. So he let them have their ceremony. The box was laid into a freshly dug hole, and a man in a slightly more shiny suit stood and spoke to the half-dozen other figures. Malnos the Rash, the spawn of two Krelniks who had more grace and kindness than you. You hurt everyone. With your words, or hands, or tools. It did not matter. For this, we are sorry. Though we deserved better from you, so too did you deserve better from us. You died hungry and alone, in the between spaces. You scarcely had a bed, and no quarters to call your own. I commit now your soul to the stars, the home of your ancestors. I commit now your body to the earth, the home of their ancestors. I hope you find the peace you deserved in life, somehow. May the Star Keeper bless your passing. May the Star Keeper bless your ancestors. May the Star Keeper bless us all. The humans covered the hole with dirt slowly, and then shuffled into their ship. SCP-682, the Star Keeper, and the last witness to a dying universe, watched them disappear into the black eternity. He walked over to the grave, pawed at the freshly dug ground, spun in place atop it, and took a nap.